Welcome back. You tuned into Mid Morning Talk with me, your host Mariam Mia, and I have now senior accounting lecturer from the University of Johannesburg. But she's going to be speaking to us in a capacity as a mum, as a parent of a child who experienced learning challenges early on. I think it was during maybe grade one, but we'll hear from her. And in terms of her journey with remediation and the support she's given her son, as well as she's here to just remove the stigma for children who face learning challenges and barriers, and create an understanding not only of your parent but around the community. How do you support children like this and parents like this without thinking in your mind, oh, this child has a problem, or looking down at that family or that child? I see Zahira nodding her head because that could be her truth as well. We'll find out from her. Assalamu alaikum, Zahira, and welcome to Mid Morning Talk.
Walaikum salam, Auntie Mariam. Jazakallah for having me.
So tell me, when did your journey begin, or when did you realize the alarm bells that your son is experiencing or not reaching development milestones, or has not mastered learning content according to what he needed to be based on the various assessments at school?
So, Auntie Mariam, our challenge began quite early, actually. So, Yusuf was a preemie baby. He was born prematurely, at around 32 weeks, and Alhamdulillah, he met all his milestones, most of his milestones rather, when they were supposed to be met, except for his speech milestone. So, speech was always a difficulty for him. He had been saying his words, his little words. They have those guidelines. They should be saying so many words at this age, and that was okay. But the minute he needed to make sentences, this is when we realized something's wrong. It sounded almost completely foreign to us. We didn't understand what he was saying. And so we spoke to the PED, and she advised us to then speak to a speech therapist. And we did that. And Alhamdulillah, he was 3 years old when I made the appointment with the speech therapist. And that's when our journey actually began. And if you talk to him now, you will never say that he had a speech problem. But that's because of the early intervention that we had in place for him. Initially, it was very difficult. And like I said, now if you speak to him, you won't know that there's a problem. But that's the glorious part of it. There's a lot of in betweens that's always, there's going to be lots of ups and downs in betweens, and we had experienced a lot of those ups and downs where, and I talk ups and downs and I say those words, and it's actually quite interesting, because if I take something simple like the word up or down, that's where we began with speech therapy. We began with the word up. We started all over again from the beginning. So at age 3, he had maybe the speech capacity then of a 6-month or a 9-month old. And we had started with a speech therapist, and we had got that journey to begin. We had got that process in place, and Alhamdulillah, early intervention helps. And I think I'm an advocate here for early intervention, because to us that was the most important, is to give our child the tools that they need to be the best version of themselves. It's not always going to be rosy. It's not always going to be fun. There's some days you're going to break down. Till today, when I speak to teachers, or if I speak to his therapist and I tell them, the first time they told me there's a learning challenge for your child, a learning difficulty for your child, that day it felt like a dagger went through my heart. And for me, initially, for us as a family, that was very difficult. There may be parents who have bigger problems, but for us as a family, that was very difficult to take away that stigma, because all of a sudden there was a stigma around our child. We were very open with everyone to say our child is doing speech therapy, and that's something I continuously do. I still do speech therapy with him. We are now trying to refine some of the things that were issues with him. Alhamdulillah, he's 9 years old. He's meeting his goals. He's at a school that supports him in his learning. And Alhamdulillah, now you would never say that there's a problem, but it wasn't always an easy journey.
So from what you told me now, besides being an advocate, it's research, yes, educational research in the field of early childhood development says the premium of early childhood, early intervention is priceless, because these are your developmental years. So learning difficulties, barriers in that, you can, with remediation, uh, remove those barriers. Milestones can be reached, or coping mechanisms, depending on the severity of the challenge. Coping mechanisms can be put in place, but various remedial mechanisms can. So things might, yes, in certain cases, um, you can assist them with intervention and they can overcome these barriers. But otherwise, we can put in coping strategies, learning strategies, but interventions are important. The other thing is, I like to commend your family, and I'm so happy you said it is a family issue. It wasn't your child had this, it was your family. Because when any of your children are experiencing a difficulty that is going to affect their educational journey, it it focuses on the family. It becomes a family issue, because everybody in the family, and even in extended family, has to be part of the solution and has to be part of the support system. So I love the word that you're using, is family. So please, parents, don't think of my child is this, and your child is not the learning barrier. This is just one aspect of his growth and development, and it's only one aspect of even the barrier to learning. So please, let's change the mindset and narrative to say, as a family, this is how we're going to deal with this issue. And everybody is going to be, and speak to the extended family as well, so that they can support your interventions. So, Zahira, how did you? There must be many uh, listeners out there who are parents who might find themselves in similar situations. How did you overcome or deal with your frustrations? Like you say, now things are smooth, but where they were, I'm sure there were days where you felt like tearing your hair out, or you felt teary, and you wanted to give up and cry and say, why me? Why is this test on me? And you were internalizing it. How do you deal with your frustrations without transferring them to your child?
So I think that's very hard to actually deal with, Auntie Miriam, because you just don't know. Some days you may be having an off day, your child may be having an off day, and you want them to perform at the best of their capacity. But maybe like adults have off days, kids too have bad days. And if Yusuf was having a bad day, if my son Yusuf was having a bad day, then all of a sudden that transpired onto me, because now I felt like I needed to do more to get him to where he needs to be. But you just, it sounds weird when you say you just take it in your stride. You talk to. I have, Alhamdulillah, a very good support system. My spouse, my parents, my siblings. I had a very good support system. There's lots of times I've called my spouse when he was at work, and I started crying and I said, I just don't know. Or I called my sister and I said, I just don't know today what to do, and they would give me advice and support, or just that support from the background to say, you got this, you're stronger than you think you are, your child is still a child, let him be a child, he doesn't have to do everything perfectly, he's still a child, let him be a child. And even in the therapies itself, I sat through the therapies because I felt it was important for me to learn. The therapy session is maybe 30 minutes long. But what you do after that at home, the support you give your child at home, it's to take from that therapy session and then support your child at home. So I used to sit through the therapy sessions, talk to the therapist. I had a very good relationship with the therapist. I used to talk to them often as to what we could do. I would give a feedback in the sessions. We initially started with 2 sessions a week, and then we moved down to 1 session a week. But it does get tiring. It gets very tiring. And then you just also think to yourself, like you said, you question yourself, why me? Why did this happen to us? Why was it us? But I truly believe, and it's something that got me through, is that Allah never tests you more than you can handle. And that's what got us through. And Allah chose us because He knew that we could be the ones to deal with it. We were the ones that He chose. He said, you are the ones that will be able to deal with this. I am testing you with this because you'll be able to deal with it. And that's what got us through. But a lot of support from family, from friends. I mean, I can't even list the people that supported us through this process. But that that process itself is very important to get through, because you're never going to always have a brilliant day. Your child's not always going to be on the best. You may go into sessions, therapy sessions, and he may not be willing to participate. And that's okay. You need a therapist that's able to adapt to that as well. So for me, it was choosing the right therapist, sitting through that, and knowing that Allah chose you because He loves you and because He knew you could get through it.
So, as you were speaking, I'm making notes here because, and let's just start of what you said in your conclusion in terms of a choice of therapist, because today, because of education and that, people are studying. There are many. So before you would have just a select few of specialist therapists. Now there are plenty. I mean, you can choose from. You have choice. And I think important when you're choosing a therapist, you need to see there's a connection between yourself as a parent and a therapist, and then between your child and a therapist. And if you find a disconnect, don't stop looking until you are comfortable with the chosen person that is going to be the facilitator of this intervention, because you you investing time, monetary investment as well, a lot of monetary investment. So you want the best result. And then if you're going to have a disconnect in terms of a relationship, that's going to prove counterproductive. So is the choice of an therapist. So all therapists are experienced professionals, but it's about a relationship and a connection. Is that, in your experience, important?
For me, that is the most important, more than just the parent themselves. The parent is one aspect, but more than that, it is between the child and the therapist. They need to connect, they need to gel, they need to be able to work together. Because when your child thinks that they're having fun, and we never ever said that we were doing therapy, we always said we're going to play with so and so, we're going to see so and so, they have great games out for you today. So that was something that we did. But once your child gels with that therapist, then you know that there's going to be, inshallah, with Allah's will, there will be success in that process, because the child then enjoys the sessions. And that for us also was very important, that we could see that our child gelled with the therapist. Obviously, they don't gel immediately all the time, so it takes a few sessions. But also, speaking to therapists out there, they don't take it personally if you tell them, you know what, this is not working for my child. I've spoken to a few therapists and said, you know what, this is maybe just not working for my child. If we need to, we will contact you again, but unfortunately it's not working for him in itself, and that's why we need to move on, or we need to find another therapist. And that also, you shouldn't feel bad to say that. Initially there was a lot of guilt for me. I would stay up thinking, how am I going to tell this therapist that no, my child isn't really gelling with you? But they don't take it personally as well. They understand, because that is part of their experiences as well. They understand that a child needs to gel with them.
And I'm so pleased you've brought this up as advice to parents, because I think that's the stress. Some people, they go on for therapy. I mean, outside they complain about the therapist, the child cries that they don't want to go, but you feel the sense of obligation or difficulty in terms of discussing this. And I think open communication is important. Zaira, so what we're going to do is, I just, before we round off, I want to ask you, I just want to stay on therapy, because you said something very important there. Is therapy is not the be all in, and also it's not those however many times a week, those half an hour sessions. Those are just the skills where the child is then going to get these skills, but it's what happens in between those therapy sessions, the practical application of what is learned. That is what's going to make the difference, and that is where you're going to determine progress. Because a lots of time parents feel, I'm doing my best, I'm taking my child for therapy, they're going for therapy, and then for that half an hour sessions, and in between therapy nothing really happens with the child in terms of family support and intervention to practice upon for application with it. And then they come in, and that's what makes the journey longer. And then you feel like, there's no progress being made, because you haven't created opportunities for practical application. How important is it to create opportunities for practical application?
Um, in my opinion, as a parent, it for me it was very important. So I felt like that 30-minute session wasn't sufficient, but also just sitting through those sessions taught me how to speak to my child, what to do for my child. So it's not always possible. I mean, in the process or in between therapies, I also had another son. That was 2 years after we started therapy. I had another son, but it was important for me to make sure that I still spoke to the therapist. I still understood what needed to be done so that we could continue that at home. And it may be something simple in your everyday life. So, for example, I'll just use one example that we had where if your child's pointing to something and if you want them to actually say the word, then you'll be like, oh, would you like an apple? So you are giving them the word for what they are pointing to. So you'd say, apple. Would you like an apple? And it was simple things like that in your everyday life that you could incorporate. There wasn't, you didn't have to sit and do homework, for a lack of a better word. I'll use the word homework. You didn't have to sit and do homework all the time. You could incorporate it in your everyday life, in your everyday doings, and also experiences. Giving your child experiences, so taking them outside and playing, that I must commend. My husband used to do that very, very often. Take them outside, play with the ball on the jungle gym, all of those stuff. It's the simple things, and having people understand and not place a stigma around you as a parent. I'm not saying it will always happen. We always have that will happen, but it's always important to continue what you learn in therapy. Continue that at home, from my opinion, continue that at home, and just do the best that you can do, because that's all that you can do, is just continue and do the best that you can do. But I think it makes the biggest difference to take what you learn in therapy and incorporate that into your everyday life.
Zaira, it's been insightful, educational, and you've given us sage advice. I think I've also learned a lot as well in terms of understanding parents and how to support parents, especially young mothers. And in your case, it was your first child, so you're still navigating the whole parenting uh, duties and chores and that. And then at a very early age, you face with this challenge and difficulty, and then you have to do. And also, I think the value of research, because this has now made you sort of a mini expert in terms of speech development and language development. And did that, I'm sure that research also and self study put you in good stead.
Absolutely. And if I can just say one thing to all of the listeners, is that when you know, or if you know of a parent that's going through this, support them. Don't create the stigma. Don't tell them, no, no, it's all going to be okay. Because you don't know on that day what it's going to be like or what they're feeling on that day. Yes, support them by saying, eventually it will be okay. But sometimes they just need a listening ear. Sometimes they just need a shoulder to cry on, because you just don't know what that parent's going through, what they experienced that day. Maybe there was frustration in because the child couldn't communicate something, and so there was frustration both ways. So Jazakallah for having me, Auntie Miriam. It was absolutely wonderful. I'm glad that I got to be on this and that I also got to share some of my experiences with listeners. And if it helps one person, I would be very, very, very happy. Alhamdulillah. But Jazakallah for having me.
I mean, we thank you for your time. I know you've got lectures now, so you can go back to your much older children, tertiary students. So, shukran for your time. We really appreciate it. And shukran for coming on and having the courage to share your lived experience. This is senior lecturer at the University of Johannesburg, but most importantly, mother of two, mashallah boys, Sister Zaheera Patel. We're going to take a short break. When we get back, we are going to be speaking about the burning issue, high cost of petrol, well, fuel.